Hi everyone, welcome to the first episode of DoubleSpeak. We are starting this little series of content, this podcast, to give you insight and content that's actually helpful, something that helps you rethink the norms, rethink the boundaries of whatever you've been doing thus far in life, career, academics. The main and the sole purpose of putting out this piece of content, this series of content, is that we give you insight that's actually valuable, and we talk about skills, we talk about mindset, and we give you tools that you can use throughout your life, or tools that don't have an expiry date per se. In the first episode today, we're going to be talking about growth and its byproducts. If you're in the process of growing in any manner or any way, right? If you're in the process of growing your own mentality, your own mindset, if you're in the process of growing materially, for material wealth, if you're in the process of growing your business, your content creation journey, your content career, your corporate career, anything, there's going to be a certain point where you sit down, think to yourself, right? Or don't sit down and think to yourself, where you basically make a decision that you're at point A and you have to be at point B in a particular amount of time, or in a particular manner, through a particular path that you'd want to follow. That process of going from A to B is called growth. And the whole point behind us talking about growth is that there are a lot of things we expect out of growth, right? We expect fruitful outcomes, we expect outcomes that are in our favor. We expect a lot of personal development when it comes to this process. If we're going to put so much of ourselves into it, might as well, get stuff that actually makes us happy, might as well get through to processes, through to journeys, through destinations that we've always wanted to get to. However, like every process in the world, the process of growth also comes with a certain set of byproducts. If you've ever studied the sciences in middle school, or even in elementary school, you know that every process in the world that gives you something worth using will also give you byproducts that might or might not be as useful or as favorable, right? And that's exactly how I want you to envision growth. If growth is the product and the process behind it is something that takes a lot out of you, then there's always going to be byproducts that come with growth as a product. Right now, those byproducts aren't necessarily always favorable. Of course, you have to make a lot of sacrifices, you have to change a lot of things about yourself, and inadvertently, right, or unintentionally, what happens is the people around us change, our surroundings change, and a lot of things that we didn't think would change go on and change because we're transforming ourselves. And with that personal transformation, your surroundings, your mindset, your circle, your friend circle, your relationships, everything transforms. So we're going to talk about 3 byproducts in particular that I didn't see coming, that hit me like a truck. And we're going to start with what I call the 3 C's. I'm calling them the 3 C's here. The first one being changing friendships and relationships. So like we were talking about, the process of growth being a transformative process, right? When you start off at point A and you want to get to point B, there are a lot of people who are going to be at point A with you. Now, everyone at point A is not going to be capable of growth. Everyone at point A is not going to want the same amount of growth or the same pace of growth that you want for yourself. So, people are going to leave. You're going to leave people. At some point, you might even find that friends you've had for lifelong childhood friends, their mentality and yours might not match. The pace of growth you have, the amount of hard work you might be putting in might not match with the amount of hard work they're putting in. And that's okay. You have to understand that everyone envisions a different life for themselves, right? They might want a different pace of growth, or they might not want growth at this particular point in their life at all. They might be happy where they are. But if you're going to change things around you, people are also going to notice that, and sometimes they might not like it. I remember when I started my foray into entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurship, especially within the first couple of years, is very difficult on you mentally, on you physically, emotionally, everything. And people around you start to notice it. So a lot of my friends, when I started this, would go on to say that, you're incredibly busy, you don't have time for us. And the amount of time I'd make for them would be less. The thing is, I'm not saying you should ignore personal relationships or friendships or family at all. It's just that that dynamic is going to change. Sometimes the amount of attention you're giving to someone or the amount of time you're giving to someone might not be sufficient, right, if it changes. For example, if I'm spending an X amount of hours on the phone with a friend every day, and one day I decide that I want to spend a lot of that time upskilling myself, doing something for myself, taking workshops, working on a skill, and I don't end up speaking to them for the same amount of time, initially they're going to notice and they might be unhappy about it. There are obviously a few friends, if you've made good friends, they're going to be happy for you, and they might even be inspired and join you in that journey of growth. But for the majority of people around you, they're going to be unhappy, because as human beings, and we've known this, we are not quick to adapt to change, which is why evolution takes so long, right? Which is why imbibing qualities and skills within ourselves takes so long. So be ready for the fact that just because you're changing doesn't mean people around you are going to change, and it doesn't mean people around you are going to accept the way you're changing or accept the change you're bringing about in your life. They might feel ignored, or they might feel like they're not being prioritized, and that's okay. You need to be able to juggle your priorities as well. But if you're going to grow, expect to lose a lot of your friends. Growth is a lonely process, not because you don't have people around you. You're going to find people around you on your way, on your journey to growth, right? But a lot of people you start out with are not the people you end that journey with when you reach that destination. They might be different, there might be less people, but quick tip: people who are working, or people who work to stick by you during this time, they're actually people who do care about you. They're actually people who also understand your priority, and that's a healthier way of managing friendships and relationships. The second C, right, which is persistent and prevalent through any field you're growing in, is criticism. So the first thing that comes with criticism is you're going to get it. You're going to get a lot of it, especially if you're in a creative career. If you're in a corporate career, or if you're in a corporate setting, I'm sure there are higher ups. There are people in the hierarchy higher than you, or in the hierarchy lower than you, who are also going to give you criticism, right? But it mostly will pertain to work. When you enter any sort of career that puts you in the public eye, any sort of career where you're showing work to an audience or a large amount of people in one go, you're going to get a lot of criticism. Now, you as someone who's creating for your own self or creating for growth, you need to know that there's a difference, right? There's a difference between someone giving you an opinion and someone giving you constructive feedback or criticism. For example, if you're in an illustrative career, or let me word that better, if you're in, let's say, graphic design as a field of work, right, and you go on to produce an illustration, and someone walks up to you and says that, I don't like this illustration, that's an opinion. There's no particular reason why they don't like that illustration, and you might never be able to figure out that reason, so good luck trying. Whereas if someone walks up to you and says, I think if you used a bit of brighter hues within your piece or within your illustration, it might pop, it might look better. That's actually feedback you can use at certain points. You can use it within that particular piece, you can use it going forward, understand the kind of hues and colors you're using, make it better, appeal to a wider audience. So there's a difference, there's a huge difference. And when someone says they don't like something, or when someone says this doesn't appeal to them, that's mostly a personal opinion, and you can't change that. Sometimes what happens is, as again human beings, we crave validation. So if someone's not giving us validation, we'll try our best to have that validation awarded to us. So we'll try working towards that. But you need to know that someone who's giving you an opinion instead of criticism might never give you that validation for your work. The validation needs to be intrinsic. The motivation you have needs to be intrinsic. If there's a lack of intrinsic motivation and you're relying on extrinsic or external factors and people to give you motivation, it's not going to last very long, because not everyone is going to give you validation or feedback that's positive all the time. You need to have internal and intrinsic motivation, work towards your goals, and also be able to use that intrinsic motivation in a manner that's useful for you in the long term, right? Something you can rely on. Always remember that intrinsic motivation will run longer and will be much more useful for you. External motivation or extrinsic motivation does not last very long, and it does not stay consistent. Another point to note about criticism is that a lot of times criticism that's not useful, or opinions, right, will come from people who are doing a lot less than you. People who've been in your position or are currently in your position know what it takes. Know what it takes to put in that work, know what it takes to put in so much of yourself and sacrifice a lot of yourself, right? They will never give you, or in most cases, they won't give you feedback that's not useful. They won't give you feedback that will not help you, because A, they know what it's like to be there, and B, being in a position of growth or being in a process of growth gives you a lot of empathy as well. Or at least for most people it does. There are people who do not have empathy or have a great lack of empathy. But for most people who have been through that whole period of struggle or hustle, they know what it's like, so they will have more empathy. Any feedback they give you will be constructed in a manner that's either useful, and if they don't have anything nice to say, they won't. Another tip when you're giving feedback: if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. Not saying that if you have negative criticism, don't give it, but if you're going to tell someone that something's not working, you need to come up with a solution. If you're saying that this isn't working for me, this particular piece of writing isn't working for me, tell them how to make it better, how to cater it to you or to the kind of audience you're giving the perspective of. There's a difference. In addition to taking criticism, you also need to know how to give effective criticism. So make sure you're always suggesting improvement when you're giving any sort of criticism that's negative, or any sort of criticism that doesn't validate work from anyone. Okay, the third C that we're going to talk about that hit me like a truck, really hit me like a truck, one that I didn't see coming, is competition. Now, of course, we're going to say, like, in the field of business especially, they keep saying business is brutal. You know, you need to expect a lot of competition, but the kind of competition you're going to experience and witness is not going to depend on anything they've taught you. It's totally a different experience for everyone. Personally, I've seen people I've grown up with, people I've started out with, plagiarize content from the company, try to plagiarize business models and try to replicate what we're doing and get ahead. And when you're competing with people or when you're competing with people you've grown up with, or people you've thought you will grow with, that really hits you, right? It hits you in the face, and it's an emotional shock that you need to be able to absorb when it comes forward. In addition to competing with people who are starting out with you, or who are in the same area and phase of growth as you, there's also going to be a lot of competition from people who are established, right? I remember when I started out, in the first couple of months of starting the company, I spoke to a lot of CEOs, a lot of established leaders in education, in hopes of finding someone I could rely on for mentorship, or someone I could rely on for just advice. And I came across this one particular gentleman, who I won't name, who runs a pretty big company in the education industry. And he said to me over the phone that, people in India are not going to accept the kind of education that you're trying to bring through DoubleSpace, or parents and children are very happy with the IIT entrances and like NEET exams and maths and science tuitions, and we're very happy with all of this and how it's going, and no one's going to really respond to the kind of product you have, or no one's going to be up for holistic education. Holistic education basically means you cater to a lot of all-round development, not just the academic part of it, but just extracurricular, skill development, emotional development, all of that. And I distinctly remember being very, very jarred. At that point, I was a little taken aback, because this person's pretty well regarded in the industry, right? And I felt that if someone in that position is saying that to me, there must be, a reason for it. But things happened, and we kept trying to, put out our services. And it's very interesting, because a lot of parents and students that we've come across through the company are very open to holistic education, right? They're very, very open to developing their skills, transforming themselves, and developing creatively as individuals. And not just students, parents as well. They really want their children to be able to develop themselves, not just academically but creatively as well. And the whole point of that is, even though a well-regarded educational leader said that to me, it turned out to be untrue at a certain point, right? Or at least we were lucky that it was untrue and people responded to us the way they did. But after a certain point in time, you need to know that if there is potential within you, right, or if there is even a hint of potential, people might not always be encouraging, right? People might try to get you to work for them, try to get you to work with them. In this particular case, after telling me that, the kind of products we were building weren't going to be useful, this particular gentleman offered me a job at his company, and it almost seemed like he really didn't want us to push, or he didn't want us to go ahead with the kind of vision we had, right? And while I turned down that job and worked for my own self and built up my company, it's interesting because the people you expect encouragement from sometimes will try to brush you off as someone who has potential within the industry, and they won't let you grow. It's brutal within the business of education. That's just one example. This has happened multiple times with us, and we're just in the growth phase. We're just a company that's 1.5 years old. There is no limit to the kind of competition that happens when you grow and as you grow within business. Apart from business, there is a lot of competition regardless of industry out there. So when you think of competition, I want you to think of it as a large crowd gathering that you're a part of, and every person out there is shouting out from rooftops about their business, shouting out at the loudest volume. So at some point, it doesn't matter how loud you're shouting out. It matters what you're trying to say to your consumer, what you're trying to say to the people on the other end, what you're trying to say through even a pitch you're making in a corporate environment to a client, right? It matters about the kind of content you have, the kind of vision you have for yourself, for your own growth, for your company's growth even. After a certain point, it's not going to be about the amount of money you put into advertising. It's not going to be about the amount of or how aesthetic your pitch deck looks. It's going to be about the kind of pitch you're trying to make, and for that you need to envision not only yourself but also people around you growing. If you're pitching to a client in a corporate environment, you need to know how to best help them grow with whatever product or service you're going to pitch to them. So it's very interesting as a writer. Even if you're pitching a book or something that hasn't been written before, you need to know how the reader will connect to it, how it will help you grow, and how it will help your publisher grow, maybe through monetary gain, or even through the kind of content that they help you produce. There's a phrase that I want to leave you with towards the end, right? Within writing, we say that if there's a book out there that you want to read and hasn't been written yet, that's your cue to go out there and write that book. So when it comes to creating anything, be it business, be it growth, be it a pitch deck, if there's an idea that exists out there that you'd want to consume or that you'd want to play around with but it doesn't exist, you need to go out there, create that, not only for yourself but also for others, right? If there's a gap, you fill it. You fill that gap with creativity, you fill that gap with new ideas, and you go from there. So when you're growing, you need to think of competing with others, but also competing in a way where you're setting yourself apart, where you actually care about the kind of vision you have. Do not compete just for the sake of competing. And if you're ever in a position of higher authority, then make sure you encourage young competition and try to collaborate with young competition, regardless if you're starting out. Business is brutal. Any environment that has competition is brutal, and you need to be prepared for it. Competition sometimes will come from people you want to be mentored by. Competition will come from people you've started your journey with, people you've known for years, and it will come in the most unexpected of ways. It will emotionally shock you unless you're ready for it. So brace yourself when you're entering something like that. So for the end of this episode, I'm going to leave you with an introduction, right, for our next guest, or our first guest for the podcast actually. We're going to have Rhythm Malhotra from the Skillet School here for the next episode. She's going to talk about a lot of interesting and intriguing stuff, including, insights about communication, insights about personality development, being a woman in entrepreneurship in India, how that works out for all of us, and also basically about holistic personality development, emotional intelligence, having people care about themselves and for themselves and present themselves in the best manner possible. So I hope you stay tuned and watch out for the next episode, and happy listening.